Welcome, movie lovers, to Anatomy of Movie here at Popcorn Talk. We learn and talk about key to happiness of life, so stay tuned.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk, we talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
That was brilliant.
Yeah. Beautiful.
I promise you that is the last French accent I'll do in a while. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Anatomy of Movie, where we are dissecting Super Troopers 2, the sequel to Super Troopers, of course. And today we have a different panel than normally, but hey, you know what? You guys might know him over from another Anatomy show, Action Movie Anatomy, Andrew Ghai.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm so happy to be here. It's been, like I was telling you, it's been 3 years since I've been on the show. I came on for Jurassic World, which is much different than Super Troopers, but my God, do I love this movie.
Well, there you go. And we have JB Zimmerman.
What's going on, guys? Happy to be here as well. I'm a huge fan of the franchise now, of Super Troopers, now that there's two. And hopefully there's more. I thought this one was great. I mean, just as good as the first, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And I'm Phil Svitek, and JB and I actually hosted a couple of shows over on AfterBuzz TV. He still does a lot of other shows there, so check him out on those shows.
Yeah.
What you got currently going on?
We just wrapping up Suits, because that finale just happened. Obviously with the big Meghan Markle news and everything. Her being a princess, or about to be. And Into the Badlands is just starting up, so that's on Mondays. You guys should definitely check it out. It's a great show on AMC.
Well, there you go. All right, so a couple of things for you, the fans. As you guys are watching or listening, understand that we're a little bit spoiler-filled, so we assume that you've seen the movie, and at this point, if you haven't, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing with your life? Number two, if you guys want to follow along in the description, there's a PDF. It's a link that you guys can click and follow along, so you guys get the full enjoyment. Besides that, we'll touch on a lot of things: story development, their Kickstarter, and kind of where they're at, and could there possibly be a third Super Troopers? So we'll talk about all that. But before we do, I know you guys kind of said a little bit, but overall thoughts. If you guys can expand a little bit further on why you love Super Troopers 2.
Do you want to go first?
I mean, there's so much to unpack there. For me, it was really nice, especially with sequels. There's always a concern that it doesn't do the movie justice. I mean, Super Troopers is one of the biggest cult classics, I think, or at least of my upbringing. And another one that kind of came to mind was Boondock Saints. When they did a sequel, that, for me, really didn't live up to my expectations. This totally did, and in a lot of ways, more so. I mean, I think the pressure is obviously on a sequel to kind of bring back the comedy and everything, and obviously the original has the originality, so they kind of are fighting against that. But I thought they did a great job kind of making a story that was similar but different and kind of expanded on what they built from the first one, and there's a bunch of funny Easter eggs for people who are huge fans in terms of the jokes, recurring characters, bringing back old faces. And I just thought they did a really good job with the writing. It not only succeeded as a sequel, but on its own as well, which is pretty tough, I think.
Yeah. So for me, it's like hanging out with your old buddies. This movie, the original one came out 17 years ago, and so with all these things happening with Infinity War is a 10-year journey. Logan's ending up. That's been 20 years. And all these things are kind of coming full circle back around. I don't know if that just means we're getting older. I think that's half of it.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
So I went into this with high expectations, but with also just being I know I'm going to be happy no matter what, because I'm hanging out with these dudes. 17 years ago, I fell in love with these guys before I'd ever smoked weed, before I'd ever partied and done anything. Because this came out in 2001. I wasn't even in high school yet. So I was kind of laughing at things that I thought I knew I was laughing at. And then you go into college, you get a little older, you get life experience, and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So for me, going into the second one, it was just what jokes are they going to reuse? What are these guys going to do that I've missed for so long? And they completely delivered, man, on every level.
Yeah, when you talk about the fear of sequels, I think part of that too, whether it's Boondock Saints or Zoolander 2,
right.
There's just such a disconnect in terms of time, right? And so this, as you mentioned, Andrew, 17 years, that's a long time. And so that pressure builds in that way to have it be good. And unfortunately with Boondock Saints 2 and Zoolander 2, man, they were stinkers. And so I was worried about that going into this, but man, it just blew me away. And part of it maybe was the audience that I saw it with, where everyone was just on board laughing. I think that had a lot to do with it, and so I appreciate everyone there. And yet I thought it was different enough and enough of the same.
Yeah, I mean, I
Counts.
think that's what's a cool thing about it is like everyone in that theater, especially with all the movies that are out right now, especially, you know, Infinity War being the biggest one and A Quiet Place just kicking ass, is like everyone that was at that screener, you knew everyone in there was dying to see the second Super Troopers. You know, I was at a press screening for Kodachrome, and there was a line around the corner for Super Troopers, and they actually had the red carpet for Kodachrome with like Ed Harris there, and there was like no one paying attention to it. But there was hundreds of people there for Super Troopers too.
And you know what I appreciate too? Like, objectively, I feel this is a good movie. It's a good comedy. And even if you didn't necessarily see the first one, I think this one still works. You know, you just kind of have to buy in the premise that, oh, America has more land in Vermont.
Right.
All of a sudden.
and
Just figured it out.
I think that's what was really cool about this one specifically was that like the plot made sense. Like it was actually kind of smart too. Like for a movie like Super Troopers where you don't really expect that to be, you know, a big selling point of the material. You know, obviously they're kind of banking on the fan base kind of going to see it regardless of if it's really good or literally just one fart joke after another. You know, and granted, there's a lot of that slapstick humor, which we've come to love from the first one. But it really like had its own story, and it was like realistic. And you know, like there was a moment where I was like, "Oh, that actually is kind of a smart plan, like that they're fighting up against." And it was like a really cool moment that, you know, to kind of juxtapose with the slapstick humor that all the dialogue is. Like the plot, like actually, if that were to, like that could actually happen today. Like you could see this actually going down.
Yeah, the MacGuffin of like the drug smuggling that was going on. You're kind of watching like, damn, that's like a good idea.
Yeah.
If this is gonna happen,
Yeah,
maybe I need to jump in on Vermont land and, you know, go stash stuff in bushes.
Right. Yeah. Like passive smuggling. Like that's a concept I've never really heard of, but I'm sure it's done in that scenario. Like it was kind of a cool original storyline that I haven't seen before at all.
Then, you know, when there's so much talked about in terms of border control, more specifically like Mexico, but this just flips it with our other neighbors. And,
Right.
you know, there's always that just American humor about our relationship with them. And so there's a lot of levels to it. The only one that seemed dated in the movie was the Stephen Hawking one.
Right.
Just
Yeah,
because-
because he obviously passed
Yeah,
away.
yeah.
I felt that way too, and I think that was probably just like the bad luck.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting. I think them picking on Canada is kind of it's just kind of a weird thing. Like in a lot of ways, society's very like hyper vigilant and like super PC about, you know, racism. You know, with everything going on in the media, like people are very sensitive to it. But they kind of found, you know, a very like thin line where it's like sort of socially acceptable. Like, you know, Canada is in a lot of ways, you know, I don't know. It's just a weird thing where it's like okay, it's like socially acceptable to pick on them.
We as Americans
and like make fun of them.
love to be somewhat racist towards Canadians.
Right.
Even back to like the South Park song "Blame Canada" winning an Oscar back in 2001, which is funny. That's when the original came out. But yeah, I think you know, is the moment in the trailer when they show you anything with Mounties, you're like, all right, I'm going to get a bunch of really dumb Canadian jokes, French Canadian jokes, like accents and all that. But you want to watch these guys be idiots. That's why we love them so much.
Well, let me also ask you guys this: as far as Broken Lizard, it seems like you guys are fans, but like, where would you rank the other movies? And where I'm ultimately headed with this, like when you look at Beer Fest, that also had a cultural meshing.
Right.
As far, you know, in that case, it was the Germans and versus the Americans of like, oh, I remember my first beer.
Yeah, so
and
good.
jokes like that.
Right.
So I thought it worked, but A, can you speak to like your love of just the Broken Lizard films, and B, specifically how you thought, you know, their use of just themes, is it similar across the movies or different for you?
I don't know about themes being completely similar. I don't know if I even thought that deeply into it, but I have seen all of Broken Lizard's films, even Slam and Salmon. Club Dread is great, but Super Troopers and Beer Fest are my two favorites. You know, I think those are pretty much hailed or regarded as the two best films. But But one thing I noticed about this one that I didn't see in Beer Fest was that they were almost confined by the relationships and the jokes that they'd already built in this world, that I think it almost suffered a little bit. Whereas in Beer Fest, they were in this brand new world. You didn't know what to expect. All these new characters, you know, Farva having an evil twin brother, essentially, or, you know, that type of thing. You can just buy into it because it's like, I want to see these people, like I said, doing dumb shit, but in a different world. And in Beer Fest, I think it really exceeded. And they were able to take those jokes to the next level. And we all know, I mean, German jokes, Russian jokes, Canadian jokes, like those are all things that we've become very familiar with in American cinema. And I think that it hindered them a little bit in this movie, sticking so closely to the themes and the jokes from the first one.
Okay.
Yeah, no, in a lot of ways I agree. I mean, Beer Fest is probably my favorite overall, just because it came out when I was in college and it was like a perfect time for me. It the subject matter hits home. But I mean, I think it's, you know, obviously Super Troopers, when that came out, it's just a blast. Like cops and like them screwing with you is like one of the best concepts. Like they can, obviously that idea has a lot of legs. But I agree, like this being a sequel, I think they were a little locked into who the characters could be. Like Farva, for instance, we all knew he's just like that asshole character. So for this, they kind of really try to exemplify that. And there's certain scenes where, like, you know, showing him at the town hall meeting, like, you know, bust out, like, making people, like, you know, pretty much initiating that whole, like, riot, basically. And they really kind of, him, I think, more than any of the other characters, they kind of push to be that, like, person to hate.
Yeah.
More so than how he was in the first one, just because, like, okay, we've realized over time, like, who this character actually is.
Let me ask
and
you,
they kind of made him more of like a Cartman guy.
as just a quick side tangent, as far as he's concerned, is he the most un-American character you've ever met? He shoots a bald eagle. Can't get the Pledge of Allegiance right. He doesn't know the anthem.
The words to the...
Yeah.
I mean, he definitely... His heart's there. His heart is there. He's not really there up here, though. Mentally, as they say.
Yeah. Well, he's just... Oh, man, there's so many moments where, like... And I think they did a good job of doing this, like, you know, making him a complicated character, as he even mentions, you know, like one of his lines is that, because he chews pills but swallows M&M's whole. Like, who does that? Who
so
swallows
stupid.
like, that's such a random idiosyncratic trait. But like, it was cool that they kind of thought about like how to build this person and like how he is kind of weird. Like, you know, at one time he's botching the national anthem at like the seemingly most inappropriate time ever, but at the same time he allows the group to kind of get a contingency plan and like, you know, grab the guns, and it's kind of a distraction thing. So it's a weird balance of like, is he that dumb? Is he so dumb that he's smart? Like, is like, you know what I mean? Like, it's...
Well, what's interesting when when you think about writing and what is a complicated character, most people wouldn't answer with, "Oh, well, he."
Rod Farva.
Right. Yeah, Rod.
Yeah, well, I mean, just the idea that you're swallowing M&Ms but chewing drugs.
Right.
That on the surface level, that doesn't make you a complicated character.
Right.
But I think what's so interesting about that is
Very true.
We all know that guy. I can tell you right now, his name is Jeremy Slater. I roomed with him for 4 years, and he was Farva. He was like, he was very smart, but he was like, he was so dumb he was smart. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he was just like loud and big and obnoxious. We all loved him. We all were annoyed to death by him most of the time, but we still loved him, you know? So I think that's my favorite thing about Farva is he's so relatable. We all have this person in our life who is just like, you know, he's got a heart of gold, but well, he doesn't really have a heart of gold. He's kind of just an idiot, but I love him, you know?
Well, they played that extremely well because, I believe that to be true, but then they use that in the movie to have a Canadian counterpart to him.
Right.
to illustrate,
ever,
even Canadians have that.
You want some creme fraiche? Yeah, that guy, I don't know his name, the actor, but that guy was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely hilarious. Great, like, and when they meet in person,
stand up.
there's just like that moment. Is so good.
What is the realization in that moment? Is it like, okay, all right, I see you? Or is it like, we are one, we are the same, you and I? Like, what is the moment that they have in their head there?
I don't know. For me, like, Yeah, I think it's just they're just stunned. They're like they don't know how to react because it's like literally like a dog seeing itself in the mirror.
Right.
It's just like like they can't even wrap their head around it. So they like just move on and like okay.
Part of it's a consensus that the world's just not ready for us to be in a world
Yeah,
together.
it's two
So we
Farvas,
have to
Yeah,
you do
just
you,
like, yeah.
and I'm gonna do me, and just don't interfere.
Yeah.
And we're
I want to
okay.
watch a movie with just the two of them, just hanging out for an hour.
Oh, they would annoy the crap out of each other. No, that's the thing because
They would kill each other. Yeah.
in essence, they both want to be alpha males, even though they're completely
Right.
not, and they would just butt heads. So it's,
Yeah, and they're like, obviously delusional about it to a certain extent. Like their overconfidence is such a disconnect from reality where I legitimately believe Farva thinks he is like more attractive than Mac, or like actually has a chance with Sloane.
Yeah, his overconfidence is amazing, and the moment when he's like, "Loser has to cut off their toe with a shovel," and everyone's like, "You should take that bet. You need to take that bet."
you
We're all
should
like, "Oh my
definitely,
god, he's gonna cut his toe off with a shovel by the end of this movie."
And he like ups the ante for no reason. Like
he's like, "But I didn't even take the bet. He's got to drink. What does he blend the
yeah,
toe up
blend
and
the
drink it
toe,
in the smoothie?"
which he does. Even like there's the after credit scene. So if you guys have seen it or are going to see it, make sure you stay till the end of the credits because he drinks that toe and likes it.
Of course he does.
Yeah.
the fact that he just did it to begin with without any sort of
Yeah, he
No
yeah,
one
it was like
holding him
it was
to
just
it.
came out of left field. I was like, dude, what? Like we were not. No one was talking about betting at all.
To be fair, that is the spirit. If you're gonna do any bet with anybody, like that's the type of person you want to do a bet with.
Oh,
Right.
definitely.
Not in terms of like who you're gonna win or lose against, but as far as them upholding the sanctity
Right. Yeah.
of that bet.
Just like, and again, after he lost the bet, he just like does it by his own volition. Like no one's like, Farva, you lost the bet. Here's a shovel.
front
We
of the
just
mayor.
hear him in the background. Again, very inappropriate time to handle that, but.
Speaking of
Farva.
inappropriate, Rob Lowe in this movie was just incredible. I think what's so great about Rob Lowe is that he's become like a caricature of himself. So now when you see him in anything, you're just like, oh man, I'm so excited to see Rob Lowe be whatever he's going to be in this
Right.
movie. But it's never like, it's not him acting anymore. It's like him being Rob Lowe as a
Right.
character. And he was hilarious in this.
He's very transformative in that unique way, and I do agree with you. I thought it was absolutely amazing, and just the fact what makes him so great is he just goes for it. Yeah. He uses a penis as a punching bag and has no remorse.
Yeah, that was definitely one of those scenes in the movie where you're like, yep, this is a Broken Lizard movie right now. This moment right here where he's speed bagging the dick is
Yeah, I mean that moment. When I watched it for the first time, I was like, "Wow!" Like where it had so many possibilities when they come into initiating the American laws, all these cool things of Canada, like the brothels are totally a-okay.
9% beers.
Yeah, they've like way high proof beer is totally cool. So to like convince a group of people that things that they've grown up as being totally fine are like illegal now would be insanely hard. And so like that kind of set up a major part of the premise with the finding these stash houses of pills in Nova Scotia. But I thought it was a really interesting way in, and like that's an aspect of Canada I didn't really realize. And I think like again, to a credit of the script, that would be so hard. Like if they were actually forced to make a community, a town, even like convince them that like all these cool things are off the list now.
Well, even just the basic premise of they're changing the kilometers to miles,
Right.
And just comedy aside, you're changing everyone's literal standard for things.
Right.
Right, and then they make a comment about Americans being the only people that still use that system and how we need to get with the program. And it's true because the whole time that they're doing height, weight, distance, any sort of measurement in centimeters or meters,
way
kilometers,
easier.
whatever, I just have no idea what anything weighs or
Yeah.
I'm just like in the dark.
Well, yeah, the conversion is ridiculous.
It's like good.
And it's weird because we're so used to our system that it is normal for us. But again, like it would be as confusing. Like when they change, like 80 kilometers. I have no really, like, it's
No
so
idea.
hard for me to think about how fast that is. So it's pretty much the same when they replace that sign with like miles per hour. You know,
What
those
was the
people are like,
equation?
what the hell?
It's
Yeah.
like you got to double it and add 32 or something like that. You're like, God, it's so difficult.
And yeah, in their mind, the humor of it being like, yeah, it is so
It's
simple.
the
like-
easiest thing ever.
Absolutely. Speaking of Rob Lowe, I just to kind of put a bow on him. One of the things I appreciate about him is that he can do comedy so well, and yet whether he's playing Kennedy or so forth, he has this natural ability to just go from one to the other so seamlessly.
Yeah, I mean, Rob Lowe's a pretty damn good actor, and I think it's almost his skills almost been diminished by his career because like a lot of the things that he's done has been forgotten about, or you know, like when I think Rob Lowe, I think TV and I think Tommy Boy. You know what I mean? And that doesn't really do his career justice because he's had a really interesting and awesome career, and like we were talking about earlier, he's a pretty damn talented actor. So. I mean, maybe this would be like another launching point in his career to like get back into feature film. Maybe if someone saw him go all for it in a movie like this, they'd be like, all right, let's get him in like I mean, no offense to this, but like a blockbuster, you know, something like that.
I mean, hey, if I had the money and if I had a movie, listen, Rob
Yeah,
Lowe has a
Rob Lowe.
place in my movie.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a really interesting balance that he's able to work with. You know, him being so recognizable, but also, you know, his commitment to acting. Like, he can just kind of own whatever character and kind of dial up and dial down, like, the Rob Lowe-ness of it. And I think he's really comfortable kind of playing on, you know, obviously he's a very attractive dude, so he's, like, can play that villain character, but, like, still charismatic enough so, like, you like him, but it's like he plays it with something a little off, like, Wayne's World comes to mind. You know, him in that, like, it starts off great, and it's like there's some little characteristic that he has that he can kind of like slowly bring out, and so it's just like an untrustworthiness. Like, you're always wary of him, even though like he seems like the best guy ever. I mean, a mayor that like owns a brothel, and so like that's ridiculous. And he's obviously a local legend in the community, being huge in hockey. He was the explosion.
Second.
Yeah, yeah. It was the Halifax. I love how they like go into depth.
He like tells the whole story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think they really succeed with surrounding themselves with like grounded, really talented actors, with Emmanuel Chikri, Rob Lowe, and Brian Cox being like these secondary characters. It helps ground the world around them, even though they're all ridiculous, because those three are so talented that our guys can kind of go nuts in the world that they've grounded. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What did you guys think of the relationship, the love? I don't know if it's a triangle particularly. It's not a very strong triangle if it is, but
it felt necessary. You know, there was Charlie's Angel in the first one, and you see her for a minute in this. I think it was necessary that Rabbit got a little bit of love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
believed
the rookies gotta get something, and I think, you know, they do a good job. Broken Lizard does a good job overall, kind of rewarding the people within their group. Like, you know, they're obviously Farva is the butt end of a lot of jokes in the Super Trooper series, but in Beer Fest, you know, he's kind of the hero. Like, he's the only one that Landfill is the one that like lets them win because he can drink so much. So I think they do a good job of, you know, even though Rabbit is obviously picked on because he's the rookie.
For 20 years.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Still, yeah. But he gets the girl, and yeah, Manuel is incredibly hot.
yeah, the only thing with him and his storyline that I just couldn't watch him get his penis. I can't even say it.
Wait, which part?
When
Oh yeah, it's
when the tip.
The
yeah.
end.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that was pretty brutal.
I mean, it played for a good joke as far as
Yeah.
the Japanese flag joke.
Dude,
Yeah.
I died. I
was
died
pretty
laughing
funny.
at that part. I was also really happy that she came back and was like, we should hang out, you know, and talk about French, whatever, afterwards, because I was like, did she just play him? Because I really liked the two of them on screen together. But yeah,
She's down with OPP. You know me.
yeah, that Japanese flag joke I
so
think might have
good.
been the best moment of the movie. For
Yeah,
me.
It was
pretty
just so unexpected.
pretty funny. Oh man, yeah, I was so like that. how they had him all wrapped up. Also, I don't know. I'll have to see it again and take a closer look. I'm pretty sure Rabbit is wearing like women's underwear in that part.
Oh,
like I was
I
like,
can't
what the
confirm or
fuck?
deny.
I would totally.
Pretty
believe it.
sure.
Yeah, it
Wouldn't bet my toe, but pretty
Shovel?
close. Yeah.
Good stuff. What new jokes did you guys like the most? And then conversely, we can talk about which recycled stuff you guys liked, whether it were the bear stuff and whatnot.
Ooh, that's a really good question. There's some...
I mean, honestly, you just saying that right now, the Japanese flag joke was probably the moment that I laughed the hardest in the theater. And then that guy, the French Farva, the Canadian Farva, every moment that he was only on screen for probably 30 seconds of this whole movie, but he was my favorite part by a mile. Just his face.
Even though he wasn't on screen, that the presence of having built him up
Yeah.
and knowing
So
what he
good.
represents, I think that's
It's pretty good. Pretty good. I would have to say, honestly, the dream scene in the beginning, like that caught me so off guard because I was so excited to kind of be back in this world and see where the characters are, after so long, for them to kind of throw a curveball was a really cool intro, I thought. And like, obviously it's not something that they were able to do in the first one, but it was it was such a funny alternate reality. And to have, like, especially when they get on the bus and he's like, yeah, it'd be funny if right when your buddy gets on, you just kick him in the nuts. I was like, I just instantly started laughing. It was like, just set a amazing tone for the movie. Because, again, we're all worried that it's not going to live up to the potential. And for, like, in that moment, like, all my worries were gone.
Yeah, it put you right back in it.
This is going to be a good ride.
Listen, kicking people in the balls is never going to go out of style.
Always going to be funny.
Hilarious.
Unless it's you.
You just got to watch out for that.
What about you? What was your favorite recycled joke? Or, I mean, new joke?
One of my favorite gags was when they were pretending to be French or French Canadian, and they just the way they spoke in front of the American couple. That to me, just them reciting the most BS cordon bleu and sacre bleu and.
See,
the toilet.
That's another great moment. Like, that scene was hilarious, but like, again, they found that perfect line. Like, it's okay, really, to make fun of French people, and they like blatantly pretend to be speaking French, and it sounds similar enough, and they're able to pull it off like non-offensively. Like, I don't even know if there's another language that you can do that with that wouldn't have like an outcry of public people being like, that's the worst, that's so
Right, because
racist.
people speak to, like, especially because we live in LA, people speak, like, we know a lot of Spanish.
Right.
Like, we just know that. But not a lot of people know, like, full sentences in French. And so for them to go through and basically deliver, like, a monologue each of just words that we all know from just living in America, hearing these French words was actually pretty damn impressive with the writing. Like, I went through and I was like, wait, every single thing that they're saying, other than like the first two lines that were actually in French, I was like, is just a word that we use in English because we don't want to change it, like eau de toilette or le cordon bleu.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that was like improv, that they were just
yeah.
like saying just like random stuff.
If it was, that's damn good improv. That's
very
knowledge of
impressive.
French.
Well, again, in the credit scene, they have a small clip of it that's like a blooper, and Max kind of saying his, and it's a completely different thing that's a lot longer and a little bit more specific, and so they obviously like had to dial it down. But it's pretty cool. Like, I mean, they were able to kind of integrate like random, like you kind of your ear catches funny things like cordon bleu, like Mesrab, and it's just
Chateau Marmont.
Yeah,
Chateau Marmont. I was like, Jesus, here we go.
but it still like legitimately sounds French enough where it's like, oh, it's a little off, but it's like close enough where maybe they're saying something.
And the button on the joke is just them completely then talking English, and of course, the key to happiness is a penis in your asshole.
Penis in your asshole.
God, I don't know how they found that line, but brilliant. Like, that was I was just like, bravo. I wanted to like stand up and clap.
I mean, it just made sense. I mean, the guy's with his wife, and you would they're just
Yeah.
egging him on of
Yeah.
like, hey, did you put your penis in her asshole?
Yeah, and he's like, I'm
essentially.
trying to tell her that.
Yeah, when he throws that in
Yeah.
there. Well, yeah, because even through the first half of the joke, when they're like, a penis, like happiness, and I was like, in your asshole. I was like, what is it? I was like trying to get there before they did, and I just couldn't do it. So when they said in your household, I was like, brilliant. Great writing.
Also, when they like roll up to the car on the horses, Mac like holding the red light, the siren was a fantastic moment.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And I love how they didn't like overuse the like on horseback Mountie thing. Like that was pretty much the only time we saw them with horses, and it, like obviously that scene crushed it. But I was worried that they would go into like the easy jokes like that. But I thought, obviously with just that scene, like they kept it super clean and hilarious the whole time.
What did you guys, before we get into the production stuff, what did you guys think about the Mounties in particular?
I thought they were pretty funny.
Yeah, I was a fan.
Yeah.
I love Will Sasso.
Yeah.
I really do. I love to see him show up anywhere because he always does a great job at whatever role he's given, and like his accent and his like speech intonation and pattern in this was very funny. All of them were great.
Yeah, no, I liked that aspect a lot, almost more so than the first Super Troopers, because with the bad guys, quote unquote, in that one, they weren't likable. Like these guys, like you were actually able to have fun with. Like they were sort of, on the villain side, but they were still, they still had funny lines. The dude like fucking a moose. But obviously necessitating
Obviously,
a ladder.
I would get a ladder.
Yeah, but I would find one and I would fuck that moose. And what the Danny DeVito conversation cracked me up so hard.
who's a great villain? Is that Penguin.
That's him too.
What I appreciate,
Same guy. How do we go through this?
I love the
So
backstory to
funny.
that joke, because Danny DeVito was a producer on the first
Right,
one,
right.
and so they just recycled that into this. That was the nugget of inspiration needed for that.
I was really hoping he was going to show up at one point. I love Danny DeVito so much.
Nice cameo. Oh,
That would
man,
have been
so
funny. That's the
funny.
guy from.
Yeah, that's the guy.
No, that's Danny
From
DeVito.
Taxis. Yeah. Oh man, so funny. Like that was I really enjoyed that aspect of like they were able to show enough of the rapport between the guys where like it's like you got kind of that they were the equivalent. Like we really haven't had like the equals, but it was cool how they brought back like counterparts. Obviously we talked about Farva, but just in general for the cops, and they had their own games.
Well, what's nice when you kind of look at it, they're able to take surface level stuff. So when you talk about the cliches and just go so deep with it. Okay, Canada, hockey, beer, and just hockey in general, right? And so they're watching hockey. Who would call during the hockey game in Canada?
Yeah, exactly.
And the fact that then becomes a very specific, aspect of their lives.
Right.
That's
why
where
don't you
the
just have a pizza delivered in overtime?
Yeah, it's like all the subtle jokes are they're almost the best parts. Whereas like the hit you over the head comedy stuff is like, this is fun and I'm laughing, but it's like that stuff is like brilliant,
All right, so let's talk about the production aspects. Specifically, let's talk about them trying to create it. All in all, over about 37 drafts, they would say to this.
Man.
And one of the things I kind of appreciate, they have this willingness to tell themselves, like, every time we wrote a draft, it just got better and better. And they're like, oh, now we're so excited. Those other drafts sucked.
Yeah, I wonder how different each draft was. Was it just like, a couple scenes here and there? Was it a full...
I know that originally the first idea for Super Troopers 2 was they wanted to set it in the 70s and like be like their dads or like their them on the force back then, but then they were so worried that era held such a close place in people's hearts, their audience's heart, that they'd just botch it. So I think if you go to Wikipedia, there's like a few different renditions that they had up there of other story ideas that were all like interesting enough, but it is pretty impressive for a team like this that's been writing together for so long to have that many different iterations. Even 10 years later, still being like, no, we can make this better. We can change it, and then they did.
In the first one, they had to rule a joke every 6 seconds, which is quite an insane rule.
Wow, yeah.
This one, I'd have to do a whole count version where I watch this, but yeah, I think it holds up to that standard.
That's crazy.
While keeping the plot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think if you average it out, they would definitely get there. I mean, just... Farva alone probably gets pretty close just because not all of his jokes are good, which is on purpose, obviously, like with all the jokes about cock and like when they were doing construction.
The really bad ones.
A lot of the jokes too. What's great about this movie, you have to see it twice, simply for the fact that you're gonna miss these jokes. I remember seeing the tire joke, and that was funny enough to me. But I had to see it a second time where they make a joke about, oh, you didn't get tired of tossing the tire.
Yeah.
Which is like
Yeah.
so dumb but so funny. Just like a really quick pun.
But I missed it the first time because everyone was laughing on the first big one.
You never played Throw the Tire on the Roof?
It's just so dumb. I'm like, no.
Of course not.
Yeah, it's really cool how they, pull out these kind of random things. Like a pretty, overarching storyline is this Fred Savage incident. It's like it's so random and specific, but it's hilarious. Like how they came up with Fred Savage being this ride along going wrong.
I was waiting the whole movie to see that. I was so glad they showed it in the post
Thank
credit.
goodness. Yeah. Although I feel like it's not really their fault because technically the fire department kills him.
Well, I thought he got shot.
Why did they get fired?
Well, because they let him go up the tree.
Let him climb the tree.
He was not supposed to go up the tree.
Gotta wait for the fire department for that. Well, we get here first, and then we call the fire department, and they get the cat down.
Yeah.
With the production, it's interesting that I think that with the GoFundMe like that, it's so interesting that you have this massive audience already in seats. You know what I mean? As soon as this movie's coming out, every single person that donated is going to go to see your movie. Whereas so many times with comedies coming out, you just kind of hope that your audience is going to be there. So I think with the GoFundMe with this movie, it was actually way more beneficial to its marketing than if it would have just come out on its own as just its sequel.
Yeah, I see two sides to it in the sense of if you're a Christopher Nolan movie, I want it to be as kept secret as possible. But with a movie like this, I appreciate the journey for fans to be able to go, and you don't have to give me all the spoilers, don't give away all the jokes, but the fact of oh, here we're gonna be in Canada, we're gonna be doing this, I think that's something special.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, we were talking about the different versions. I think they realized that people come to Super Troopers to see these characters, in the roles that we love. It was a little, with them being promoted to actual, real cops at the end of Super Troopers 1. I think they did a great job of realizing why people like this movie because of the shenanigans they can pull and for them to figure out okay, they have to be fired from that so that we can go back to square one and get them from a different side and then back in. So I think they did find a really authentic way and very Super Troopers way to get them both fired and then rehired to their old jobs where they do have a little bit more leeway other than just actual local cops that are super bureaucratic.
Yeah, I can see that. Absolutely. And overall, there's quite a success. When you talk about in terms of the fans coming out and the success of all of this, the fact that it was number one on a Friday, and and then the money it made, people had it projected completely wrong as far as what it was going to do, and it just blew it out of the water, and I'm happy for them.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I don't know if I'm dying to see a third one. I don't know if that'll kind of, for me, kill the franchise because I don't know where they're going to go from this one. But at the same time, if it were to come out in 5 years or 2 years or in 10 years, I would go and watch it, definitely. And then for it to do as well as it did, I'm just happy. I'm happy for those dudes because they're funny and they're great and they love what they do and they all work together. They're friends. It's just kind of us living in LA. So many groups of creatives that are just gunning for it, and they were just one of them that did. They all met in college and stuff. And so, for me to see them make that much money and get a crowdfunded movie is just fuck yeah, awesome.
Yeah, no, I think it's really cool to see both as these the actors can pull it off, but they also write it. So it's their commitment to each project is so huge. And I think that's really cool. I'd love to see them do sort of another concept because, obviously as much as I love Super Troopers and wanted a sequel immediately, for them to kind of change gears and do Club Dread and then Beer Fest, which obviously is amazing. I think it's really cool to see them try new concepts and like see what else they can do and what other universes they can build, because I think they work really, really well together. And they've amassed such a following, not just for Super Troopers, but for the Broken Lizard brand. And Kickstarter is a testament to that. I think it's really cool that they can show these big studios that it doesn't movies don't all have to be Avengers. Yeah, that's great. We should have those, but we can also have these like smaller movies that are funny for like a more niche audience, and people will go out of their way to support that, like whether it's in the theater or on a Kickstarter campaign. Like that's really cool.
Yeah, and I hope, to me, there's two successes that kind of come out of this, and I really hope they continue in the vein of them. Number one, you see a lot of groups kind of form, and like whether it's Seth Rogen and James Franco and even Judd Apatow, like they're all kind of in that clique, but they're not known as something. These guys are known as Broken Lizard, and I appreciate that moniker given to them, and that's what that brand, that identity is higher than their individual selves, in this regard.
Definitely.
Right.
And number two, to your point, I want to see them do other movies, and I'm not saying stick a middle finger up to like Hollywood, but just continue to do Indiegogo campaigns and whatnot, and get the movie. Like, I hope it is a green light for them to be like, oh, we do have a fan base. Let's just do it with them, and we'll be all right.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, I hope that this movie and obviously Jay directing like all the Broken Lizard films, like I hope now they might be able to have a little bit more power. I mean, I know that he alone kind of brought in a lot of the financing too. So hopefully they're able to, in the next movie or project that they do, have more control in terms of the back end, like getting that money coming in. Like if they're able to produce like more outside of the studio and retain more of the money coming in, I think that would be really cool. And then they can just grow and grow and be more of a, just have more resources.
Yeah, well, I mean, with this, with the success of this movie, it, like for me as a fan of them, it just calls out, well, then where's Weed Fest? That's what they talked about at the end of Beer Fest, was when they ran into Willie. It was like, that's another place. I'd be stoked to see them. I mean, if they're going to recycle Super Troopers, why not recycle their second most successful entity, which is Beer Fest, and give us the sequel that we want there too? 10 years later as well.
Yeah,
It said it was coming soon.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's what I'm hoping soon starts to become more actual soon. And one of the things like I appreciate if they continue this sort of Indiegogo route, like it almost makes them regular human beings. Because some of the stuff that they're giving out, like it's a lot of money, but like I think it's $15,000. Come to a ball game with us. And it's like, okay, well that in itself can spark. You're connected to your audience in a very intimate way, and the jokes for future movies can kind of connect from that, of like, oh, this happened at the ballpark, when we incorporate that somehow.
Yeah, and like the idea of like, pay $10,000 and get in the movie, pay $5,000, get a producer credit. Like it's like really cool stuff for people, like to be able to watch me and be like, hey, there's my name with my favorite people.
Yeah, I think they really took the time to think about what would be cool. And I think I heard that they actually looked at campaigns that had certain rewards and like where people were kind of upset, and so they went the extra mile to like think about what would be, as a fan, like really cool to have. Like, okay, let's definitely give them free tickets too, like let's work with Fandango, like let's do all these things that we can really support, like give back to the people that are helping us. Like, and I think it's their care for their audience that a lot of movies just don't have. It's not just that they like are like, okay, people love us, let's ride that. It's more like, how do we reward them back? Like, how do we stay, or keep that relationship gold?
Yeah, and the marketing team behind it releasing a week after A Quiet Place and a week before Infinity War on 420 is pretty genius, for especially for this
yeah.
movie. That's why I'm saying, like, make a sequel on 4/20/2020, something like that, of Weed Fest, and like we'll all be there again. You will make another, 17, 12. How much do they make? 12 million?
17 million
17
all
million?
in
Yeah.
overall. But yeah, I mean, well, again, that's going to obviously continue, I'm sure. But as far as the marketing too, what I appreciate, like, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily cost money either. So, for example, they did a whole cross promotion with, I forget if it was Lyft or Uber, but they had a promo code because of 420. Like, hey, go see the movie, get high, but they don't drive.
Right.
And it's a simple thing. It doesn't cost anyone money. It's good for Lyft. It's good for them as far as promotion.
Yeah.
So you're all in.
Yeah. No, it's really cool that they thought about all those things, and again, it's just like it has all of it just seems like a passion project, even though it's it's a movie and they do a lot of cooler things. They're able to like amp things up with much more production value and get some great cameos and stuff, but it's still like their movie, like they're making it all, like they care about everything, like they want it to succeed, they want audiences to like it, so that's really cool.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts before we wrap this out? I think we've kind of said a lot of it, but nonetheless.
No, I mean, see it. Go see the movie.
Yeah, I mean, dude, it was so funny.
Well, in that case, where can people interact with you guys more offline?
You guys can find me at Andrew Ghai on Instagram and Twitter. And on this video, let us know what your favorite moments were in Super Troopers 2. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, I'm gonna chime in right now. Yeah. But yeah, you guys can follow me, JB, everywhere at Hey John Blake, Twitter and Instagram. I've hosted a lot of shows on AfterBuzz TV, so definitely check those out.
And you can follow me at Phil Svitek, and our other normal hosts are at DMovies1701, that's Dimitri, and at Serafini TV for Marissa. Check us out, and yeah, I would love to, a couple of things. Let us know how you rank the jokes, and even if you can't rank them, just bullet point them. Who cares? There's just so much stuff to talk about and have fun with, and also what sort of other thing you'd like them to go into. A lot of good stuff there. Thank you guys as always for joining us yet for another Anatomy of Movie, and as always, we've got a lot of stuff in the archives for you guys to check out, so don't hesitate on that. Lots and lots of movies to go through, and in the future, next week, in fact, we will be doing Avengers Infinity War, so lots to talk about there, and the big summer of movies coming up, so stay tuned for that. Thank you guys. We'll see you next time on another Anatomy.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.